the fact that, as these tools get introduced into our flow, right, whether it's like a Grammarly plugin or Open AI plugin, what have you, and we can then take viewpoints of the world, ways of thinking that are more effective at creating the world that we want to create and influence our interactions towards these outcomes that are more healthy, more productive. That's the world that I get excited about.
Nick, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Looking forward to jumping into a lot of topics here about business, about enterprise, about AI, through all of it. But for those of you who don't know you, why don't you start by introducing Nick and what you are and who you are in this world?
Yeah, sure. So I've been based in Silicon Valley for 10 years, worked with mostly venture-backed startups in the developer tool space. Prior to that, I was on the East Coast building out non-venture-backed businesses in the energy services and sustainability industry. Yeah, I have a technical background, physics, EE. I think my initial experience in the East Coast was pretty formative, building out an energy services business. Essentially was a mini MBA, building out, the New York City office for this fast-growing company. Came out to Silicon Valley 2013, was the first head of sales at an analytics API company called Keen.io. We were backed by Sequoia at some point during my time there. From then on, worked with a number of various software infrastructure developer tool startups in the database space, data analytics, some machine learning. And then one of note most recently was a company called Ngrok, who's still going at it today. Alan, who's the CEO of Ngrok, and I had worked together at Keen.io. It's another developer tool play. And so a lot of the work that I do is around bringing technical products built by technical folks to a technical audience, typically in data infrastructure, bringing it up into the enterprise. So how do you build a repeatable sales process? How do you have market product positioning into the enterprise?
I think the intersection between engineering and sales has always been a very fascinating one. I think engineering is the skill of building, right? I mean, it's literally kind of breaking down to being able to create, but then sales is this aspect of being able to communicate and being able to kind of connect between the idea that someone wants or the problem that someone has, and then being able to actually make that a reality. So it's interesting that you had the pairing of those skill sets. And I know you'll probably get to this aspect, but in Silicon Valley, there is that gap between selling to a venture capitalist or selling to your first customer and solving that pain point of a particular company business with the solution that you are actively building as well. So it's just interesting to kind of highlight that piece of formative background that you have and kind of the building blocks and the steps that you went through to develop those skills.
What's interesting to me about that too is, for sure, having an engineering background, and at the time, it's more, a lot of the folks who were salespeople, who had sales targets and goals and were paid commission and were engineers. And a lot of the times their job title was project engineer. And we would go and we would sit with the prospective customer and we would show them all the engineering work we did. And that was our competitive advantage. That's how we won them over, was essentially out engineering the competition. And so to me, the relationship between solving a problem and leveraging your technical prowess and advantage that you have in order to win an opportunity to earn someone's business is pretty, I think, an intuitive, formative foundation that I had coming out to Silicon Valley. What's interesting or noteworthy is that in Silicon Valley, I work with some of the most bright software engineers that, this is where people come, right? You're coming from MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Harvard, Stanford. Everyone wants to be a VC-backed founder now. I find that the majority of the work that I do with founders is to influence their thinking around what problem am I trying to solve, who am I trying to solve it for, and baking that into the position, to the positioning conversation, the unique value proposition conversation.
So when you're working with a founder on helping them kind of shift this lens of product-led growth, product-led marketing, product-led sales, and thinking about the problem and the pain that you're actually solving, what does that look like? Do you have a, for instance, or an example client that you could talk through, or a set of questions that you kind of go through to shift this mindset? Because I'm an engineer myself. I've worked with many engineers, and often you can become overwhelmed with thinking about the solution in isolation. You think about the problem, and you're just kind of, you're coding. You want to make it better. You want to make the code cleaner. You want to make it a more robust solution, more scalable, and yet you can get very disconnected from the end customer. So I think that lens and that focus is exactly what a founder or an early stage company needs to focus on. But give me a for instance, or give me an example of how you tactically do that with the companies that you work with.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of writing and talking out there about finding product market fit, and there's a lot of framework. There are a lot of frameworks. There's a lot of really experience-based wisdom that's codified and put out there. I find that most founders glaze over when you're presented with any of these frameworks. I think where it becomes relevant to them is once the organization starts growing and people have to know how to work together, and the marketing team is like, well, what are we doing? Who are we selling to? That strong forcing function tends to drive technical founders to be more crystal clear and razor sharp. So the way I try to explain it is I try to meet folks where they're at and say, look, what would it take to get your existing customer to refer your product to another organization? Why would they do that? What would they say? And, so a lot of the times it's hitting it not necessarily right on the nose. I could come in with unique value proposition frameworks. What problem, what pain point are you trying to solve? Where that does work is when I'm working with a sales rep who has a quota, who's working with a founder, and they're like, how do I sell this? And then we're like, okay, well, now let's take a look at how we sell this. I think what the challenge is when you're a founder and you have VCs and you're trying to pitch them and you're trying to keep them excited about the vision, and you're operating on that layer of abstraction, there is something about being human and the human brain and being able to shift the other abstraction of putting yourself in the customer's shoes that is just really challenging. And it's not intuitive to most people. I think a lot of founders, as they get more experienced and they end up going through the motions of closing a lot of deals with customers, and especially if it's their second company or they've been involved in multiple companies, something starts to click, I think, where they're like, oh yeah, why are we doing all this? Because someone's going to give us money to solve a problem, and we need to have a stump speech around that. Otherwise, it's not going to work. But I think when all of the incentive structure is built around how do I get VCs excited about this, it's a different mental orientation to you're thinking about the ecosystem and and around product positioning and whatnot.
And you really do have two customers. You have the VC, right? You are selling something to them. What are you selling? You're selling equity, right? And so the pitch that you have to sell equity in the form of dollars is very different than the product that you're building, what you're selling to your customer. And your customer, you may not actually even know who they are, right? You might have to go through this process of finding your ideal customer profile and product market fit and iterating and changing. And so I would absolutely agree with you that founders often fixate on the investor or the VC or the angel investor as their primary sales focus. And you have to. As an early stage company, if you are fundraising to be able to build your platform, you can't do the building of the product and finding your customer if you don't have venture dollars. So you do need to focus on that problem first, and you do need to sell to that customer first. But I think you're absolutely spot on where if you don't have that experience, or you haven't gone through enough sales cycles, or you haven't done a startup before, that transition, that unnatural transition from here's my vision, here's my idea, here's what I think this solution should be, into let me actually talk to people and see if they're going to pay me money or refer other customers to me. That's definitely a gap that needs to be transitioned. And if you don't do it effectively, you can raise a lot of money, but you might not build a product that actually solves anyone's pain.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think I like the way you articulated that of the VCs are a customer and you're selling them equity. I I find though that there's this uh, there's this there's this default reactive stance though that a lot of founders, especially if they're a bit inexperienced in sales, will take, where they're sort of trying to tailor their entire vision to what the VCs are looking for, right? And so they're constantly checking, will the VC go for this?
Trying
Will
to
the VC
people
go for this?
please the VC, and yes.
And the problem with that is, you know, is there obviously there are plenty of problems with this, right? Because VCs are essentially operating based on FOMO, and like a deal is hot, all of a sudden everyone wants in. So you're trying to change to the weather in a lot of ways. Now, what I find is that in those dialogues, when you are talking about what problem you solve for the customer and you're talking about actual customers who you're talking to, who are telling you about their problems, who are putting money behind that, who are doing pilot projects with you, all of a sudden, all of the chatter and the wind of the conversation gets anchored. If you're dealing with an investor who understands and has been around for companies that have been selling. Now, of course, a good investor, I think, will have good questions around and think strategically with you around, okay, well, how sustainable is that? Are we building a moat or not? Especially in the AI space, there are a lot of businesses that are, this ecosystem is there's a lot of ephemerality we're going to see in this ecosystem. But I think that, like, in order, you can reorient those conversations real quick by just focusing on the conversations you're having with real customers and what people are actually doing. And that it just levels the playing field.
It does kind of filter out all the noise of saying, oh, well, I have a real human that is paying, or a real entity that is paying me money for a thing. Let's lean into that. Let's do more of that. I want to go back to something you said actually earlier, which is all founders want to be venture backed. And again, I know that's kind of, you were saying it a little bit in passing, maybe it's a little bit glib, but since you are so close to that ecosystem, you are based in the Bay, you work with founders and kind of going from that seed or pre-seed to Series A journey, have you seen AI shift the landscape for founders maybe wanting to bootstrap a little bit longer or raise less capital or do fewer rounds? Because I've talked to a few people anecdotally where that's come up, but I'm curious, since you have a broader pulse on the landscape, is that something that's a trend, or is that just kind of small sample size for me anecdotally?
I mean, there are always trends in VC, right? If there's up and down, you're hot, then you're not. I think specifically with AI, this AI wave, ChatGPT, came out at a time when economically we are in a bit of a recession, and people are laying people off, sales pipelines are shrinking, forecasts are dwindling, people are punting on growth milestones. So VC dollars have already tightened up, right? So you're starting from that baseline. AI is a bit of a bright spot in that area. One, because of just all of it's abundantly obvious to a lot of people that how much tremendous business value is being unlocked and will be unlocked. And there's obviously a tremendous amount of speculation and that baked into there as well. So having a sober approach of parsing out the signal from the noise is an important component to that. In terms of fundraising versus bootstrapping, what I'm seeing is you have a lot of startups, if you want to call it that, product builders who are building, OpenAI wrappers or other LLM wrapper products that are just printing cash, chat with XYZ legal docs or this whatever, who have little to no interest in venture capital, and they have no need for it. Like they have a sustainable business, they're growing already. Of course,
sustainable might be a stretch, but they have a profitable business that is growing. We'll see if the barrier is lowered because there's no real moat in that model fundamentally. Yes.
I should, yeah, retract the word sustainable, right? For sure. But I mean, it depends. I mean, can you iterate? I mean, you can start there.
Yeah.
If you're going to go after where the cash is, where the value is. I think some of these writing assistants and whatnot and other tools, I mean, they're blowing up right now and they're printing money. So yeah. But a lot of the VCs want to be in the the picks and shovels, so to speak. Even within the picks and shovels arena, there's all this ephemerality we're seeing. It's really
Yep.
it's really tough for organizations to have moats, whether you're in a vector database or ML ops or what have you.
We're going to see who comes out as the kingpins, and we know that someone's going to win, but backing the right shovel or the right pick is a very difficult game to play in. But again, that's part of the VC model is a little bit spray and pray. We need one company to carry the portfolio. We get 20 bets, so hopefully we get 20 shovels we bet on. One of them will carry the fund. One of the things that we touched on as well, though, is outside of the traditional VC side, or maybe it's even just later stage venture-backed companies, is startups have always been focused on innovation. Let's take a new technology, a new platform. Let's take mobile. Let's take social. Let's take virtual reality. Let's take AI and innovate. Let's build something brand new. Try to capture something or solve a problem that hasn't been solved before, or in a different way, or a different vehicle. Right? It's all about newness. We have this other side too, which you and I touched on a little bit before we hit record, of the bigger scale, the enterprise of we already have a company. We have a company that does X, Y, Z. We do it through ABC process. And now we have this tool. We have intelligence as a service, which we can tap into via an API that can do low-level human labor that previously you could not do except through humans. So talk a little bit about the landscape of this, agent structured, agent architecture, multi-agent architecture workflows that are coming about that you're starting to have more conversations around with established companies that say, hey, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit right here for me to capture ROI in. It used to take me 5 days to do it. Now I can do it in 1 day, and it can go 24 hours, and I can dynamically scale it rather than having to go out and hire more heads to be able to do it.
Yeah, I think so GTC was this week, and I think one of the big statements that Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA, made was around the untapped potential of the gold mine of data that all these companies are sitting on, right? And it's fitting for their market position where they're sitting, right? They want everyone to be spinning up AI use cases and utilizing compute that they're providing. Now, the C-level folks that I talk to who are, reading AI articles every day are asking, okay, of all the things that my organization, all the tasks that my organization does every day, every function that I have, how much of this could I be offloading onto AI, right? And how should we be approaching that? So, I was on a phone yesterday with a CEO who was saying, well, I don't know, like, will the entire SDR function become an AI agent at some point? I think that's a bit of a stretch. But I think there's truth inside of that. A lot of that functionality for sure is going to be AI driven. I think a lot of folks are seeing like the article come out about Klarna with OpenAI and their use case. 75% of their support is now AI facilitated. And I think, and people are happier. Customer satisfaction is up. So executives are seeing this and they're thinking to themselves, okay, where should I be deploying this, right? And also privacy. How do I make sure that, am I just giving all of my secrets away to Microsoft or OpenAI, or is there a difference? I don't know. So that's where you see a lot of folks looking to go on-prem and pulling up the open source models to run those. I think right now, from what I can see, a lot of folks, it's still, to generalize, it's still fairly early. There are some slam dunk use cases for people though, right? That we're already seeing. One, to be able to search your entire repository of data and have an LLM like GPT-4 power be able to retrieve that the relevant data that's stored in a vector database throw it into an LLM and come back with insights is really, really powerful for people. No more searching and, moving across the organization to try to get the information that you need. I think
Searching
the support,
Gmail, searching Google Docs, searching Slack, trying to figure out where that one thing was, right? Searching
well,
your
and then
personal
asking
notes from
people,
meetings.
yeah, hey,
Yeah,
where do
exactly.
I get this? And then I got to wait for them and this, right? And then, so a lot of that, even the permissioning and whatnot, security, that can be figured out, right? Or a lot of that is figured out, so that can be addressed. There are a lot of tools in the market to do that. A lot of people are standing custom things up as well. I think the other next low hanging fruit is the support tickets, right? So obviously chatbots, that's a primitive, a functionality that we're familiar with already. So ticket deflection has been a thing already. It's something people are familiar with. But I think where it's getting really interesting is to be able to, for just the context of that agent that customer is interacting with now, to be so much broader and deeper across a trove of data, for the experience for the customer to be so much better. And then also, I think what's really interesting is as these agents start to be able to take on learning capability, right? To be able to use, that's what machine learning is all about. Like you give it information and it gets better at a task. So that's where it's also going to get really, really interesting. Yeah. So I think every functionality right now within an organization has some sort of workflow that will be automated by AI. And I think the objective now is to empower employees to be able to build these workflows and work in a much more leveraged capacity.
How much of this future world is a multi-part question, so bear with me here. So one is, how much of this future world do you think is going to be human plus AI versus just full on AI? And then kind of tying into that is this aspect of whenever you get a performance increase, it doesn't matter old industry, new industry, whatever, you have a choice. And the choice is, should I do the same that I was doing before, but for less? An example that would be, it used to take me 100 humans to manage all the support tickets. Now with AI, I only need 50 people. So I can fire 50 people, or I can scale up my company bigger with the same support staff, right? So doing more with less, which is effectively increasing ROI or cost savings. Or the counter side of that is, you could also just say, we're going to be unparalleled in our customer support versus all the competition. So we're going to have this AI aspect do a lot of the work, but then we're going to, all the customer support man hours that we had and woman hours that we had, we're going to put them into some other way of delivering value to our customers. So maybe we'll now have more personal touches or more human engagement or interaction on things that we weren't able to put attention to. So I'm curious in kind of both of those questions. One is human plus AI, what's the future look like on that side? But also with these savings, with this additional power that we now are pouring into our organizations, does it just turn into bottom line profit, or does it turn into better experiences for the end customer?
Yeah, I think, so I think a couple things. One, this AI versus human, valid question, valid starting point for tons of nuanced speculation, and validity in various aspects. I think one, you know, I think what it'll actually look like in 5 years from now, we don't know. We have some clues. Some of it's going to be the same. Some of it's going to be really different. But like we know it'll be different. And we know that we don't know, right? So there's the some of the speculation, I think, is what I mean to say by that is, there are a lot of things we just wouldn't have predicted about today that I'm sure we're just not predicting about tomorrow. I think,
Kind of that
right,
event horizon we can't quite see beyond the next 6 months, the next 3 months, even with AI. I mean, it's hard to really know what's going to pop up.
Yeah, and I think taking an open mind to it is, and a humble approach, I think is kind of how I look at it. That said, I think the user experience expectations are changing more quickly. It used to be more that, okay, well, like, look at what the younger generation is doing. Gary Vaynerchuk always, paying attention to what are the kids, on Snapchat doing? What are they doing now on TikTok, and helping brands really target in that younger demographic to understand their expectations to how interactions work in order to market to them. I think that with LLM based applications, AI at large, the expectations from a user experience are just accelerating toward frictionless, intuitive engagement with people, and like highly contextualized to them, their experience, and much more information. As much people are like, oh, I don't want to give my data to Facebook. I don't want to give it to this. The reality is, you know, that's how a lot of our experience on shopping online and all the things we do online is actually tailored to us, right? So I think we're going to see that heightened consumer expectation for seamless user experience as people iterate in the market. People are like, oh, this is so cool. It works like this now. It's so much easier. I think that's going to drive the forcing function for a lot of organizations to catch up and be like, okay, well, we got to be able to serve it like this. Well, wow, we're really going to have to deploy AI in a deeper way. So it is true that it is a competitive lever to pull to accelerate against your competitors, to say, hey, we're going to offer an AI based user experience for people, and we're willing to experiment right now and see what sticks, and try to race ahead. And then as those consumer expectations change, I think you're going to see more folks playing catch up with that.
Maybe to close us out, Nick, what is the AI future you're most excited for? And maybe it doesn't have to be an AI future, but we're entering into what I think is potentially a golden era, which sounds big and grandiose, but we're entering into a new inflection point of rapid iteration and growth on technology at a pace where we truly can't project 6 months into the future. It was very different in maybe 2010. We see the iPhone and we see, okay, well, we're just going to have more of these and they're going to be better of these and it's going to be different. The internet was, again, an inflection point of, okay, we have the internet. What's it going to be? And it took us a decade to kind of say, okay, early 2000s or late 90s, we kind of see what this is going to be and there's going to be more of it. But with AI, we still don't quite see what that future is going to be, and how this is going to start touching the hard sciences and biology and being a doctor and doing research and all these different areas where we focus far more on the commerce and the business side, but we haven't applied to so many other areas of existence. So my question for you again is, what are you most excited about, broadly speaking, or what future do you want to see us move towards?
I appreciate that question a lot. So what I would say is this is, social networks, essentially why, and on mobile devices, right, have been incredibly effective at driving our perspective in terms of how we shop, how we think about the world, who we interact with, whether we get really angry and are polarized and politically, whether we decide we're going to connect with what communities, and also our attention span, right? How much attention can we actually devote to any specific task? They've been what I'm trying to say here is, using machine learning on these social networks, when, Zuck was back in the day with Chamath and they're running these growth experiments and it was all about optimizing the like button, and, that was highly effective at changing our lives. And as, a lot of people would argue, not for the better, right? People are addicted to their phones. The younger generation is struggling in a lot of ways, especially with COVID. Car accidents are up and insurance premiums are up because people are on their devices all the time, especially after COVID. Like, there are a lot of doom and gloom stories around it that are very, very valid. And I think, to me, it's always been machine learning plus putting something like this in everyone's pocket, and the right, design engineering with, like, Instagram, Facebook, all these socials, highly effective at influencing people. But it was motivated by getting people to buy more, right? You get your audience segmented, you can sell them
buy more, watch more eyeballs.
That's it, right? That whole thing. I think, what's interesting about AI, and AI is really just machine learning research, right? That's what I think most people are talking about. They're like, hey, wow, there's the specific technologies that have come out with diffusion models, with large language models, that and compute resources that we can utilize, and a lot of collective investment and intellectual horsepower put around this, where we can actually we have these emergent behaviors and emergent patterns with these technologies that we can really build super interesting, useful things that we hadn't been able to build as quickly before. So I think what's really interesting to me is being able to put these tools back into the, into the hands of people, of individuals, of communities, where they can then be in the driver's seat around how they're interacting with the world. So, for example, I'm, if you're looking at, this is a, I'll share a personal example. So I see a therapist, right? And I record all of our sessions on Otter. I love Otter. It takes the transcribes, and then I can search for it.
Otter.ai. Check it out.
Otter.ai. Yeah, it's very cool. And so, the fact that I can chat with the transcript and ask questions like, okay, what are my biggest growth edges, or what are my areas that I could be looking at more proactively, or what are some of the themes that are coming up here, and have really powerful insights and be exposed to blind spots that I otherwise might not have been exposed to. Or, for example, we're often like texting with everyone, we're Slacking with everyone, we're emailing with everyone. The fact that, as these tools get introduced into our flow, right, whether it's like a Grammarly plugin or Open AI plugin, what have you, and we can then take viewpoints of the world, ways of thinking that are more effective at creating the world that we want to create, and influence our interactions towards these outcomes that are more healthy, more productive. That's the world that I get excited about. And I think that's, I mean, I'm an optimist. I know there's people who are on the other end of the spectrum that are saying, no, it's going to be, everyone, it's X, this person, this tech titan is going to try to just take over. I don't think that's the case. I think that people are, even the people who are here in Silicon Valley, who are, that people imagine the people at OpenAI clacking on their keyboards and they're, or Elon is, preparing to take over the world. I mean, I think a lot of the people who are building really do have intentions to make better products, to make people's lives better. I think we're at with this, a lot of this technology, with the way we can shape and influence our way of interacting with one another to be more effective. I think we have an opportunity to actually correct a lot of the harm that's been done on our attention span, on our emotional well-being, on our social isolation, all these effects from the previous era of ML-based social networks.
I think it's a phenomenal answer, because we look back on the past decade or dozen years or so, and kind of with the, I guess even longer, but the advent of social media and kind of Web 2.0, and it really was all about social engineering to manipulate humans to doing behaviors that were not necessarily in that human's behavior. And whether it was nefarious or not, right? Whether it was, we knew what we were doing, what Facebook knew what they were doing, what Google knew what they were doing or not, it had a negative impact on our well-being as humans and our psyches and our connectedness or lack thereof. We feel more connected because we have this dopamine rush of Instagram, but then we feel disconnected because everyone has a glorious and amazing life that ours is nothing like that. So we feel shame. And so it's almost a blessing that we went through this period of manipulating and using technology to manipulate humans, and learned all the bad that can come from that. And there is kind of this new approach to technology of saying, how can we use technology as a tool? Yes, but not have it use us. And so if we had AI or ChatGPT, kind of the modern AI, I should say, of LLMs a decade or 15 years ago, that could have been a very scary future. But the fact that we went through that learning period as humanity and we're now on the other side of it. And now we get this new tool of LLMs and AI and generative AI. It's almost as if we needed to go through those training wheels so we could learn what falling down looks like and learn what manipulating people through technology looks like, so that we can go more informed into the future and be more intentional about how we use AI going forward.
That's a great point. That may we use this recent experience as a phenomenal learning opportunity to just to respect the power of you know the efficacy of a group of really bright software engineers and designers, designing, like you said, social experiments in order to optimize human behavior in a certain direction, and yield that power skillfully. I do think that it is good though that people are having conversations about that. I do think that just like we are in an era where, you often have to guard your attention because everything is, it's always been like this, right? We've had billboards for years. So there's always been someone from Madison Avenue trying to come in and grab your attention. I think with social and devices, obviously it's just the loop has gotten a lot faster. The iterative cycle has gotten a lot faster. People being able to measure experiments and results much faster, so they've been able to iterate. I do think as that accelerates, as the ability to take a tremendous amount of someone's data and like really tailor things, I think the power is also going to be a lot higher too. So we'll have to be careful about that. But I hear interesting arguments on the other side. What happens when, does the entire search advertising model work when you're moving to more of, you have agents that are out doing all the search for you, right? When you could be like, hey AI agent, find this for me. By the way, no ads, or do the advertisers go start moving into, paying to update the weights and biases of the model, right, with their content, right? So I think that's another part of this area that's really interesting, is a lot of the infrastructure, the information supply chain, and the monetization supply chain around media, publishers, content producers, et cetera, needs to be changed, as LLMs are a big part of are in the loop of us receiving information and things that we want. That's another component of this as well.
Regardless of where we're headed, we will definitely be living in interesting times. That much is certain. Nick, if people want to connect with you or learn more about you, where do they go to do so?
Yeah, you can reach out to me, nick@validsignal.com. That's my email, our website, validsignal.com. Feel free to get in touch. Also, our organization, modelpath.ai. That's our group of AI developers that are building enterprise projects, like we talked about earlier.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot. Talk soon.